front of the building will fall off. Hey, everybody, welcome to the Atheist Experience. We are live. Today is November 10th, 2019. I'm Matt Dillahunty. Joining me this week, I'm very happy to welcome Lloyd Evans, author of The Reluctant Apostate.
It's a big book.
It is a huge... This is a tome. Like, I want to send a copy to... Mike Licona, because I debated Mike Licona on the resurrection, and he's written like the biggest book I've ever seen on the resurrection.
Right.
But all he talked about was like floating trash can lids and Ouija boards.
That's pretty much what I write about as well. Yeah. Just a heads up, yeah.
You should totally write that on the cover page. We'll send him a copy. How are you doing?
Not bad, yeah. It's an immense honor to be here.
I'm very thrilled. And actually...
Good grief, I thought I turned it off.
Amateur. It's live TV, man. We can't do that. We got all those people to silence their phone.
Is there a river I can throw this?
So anyway, I was in Phoenix last night. I flew to Phoenix yesterday. The Humanist Society there in the Greater Phoenix area, Seth Andrews and I did an event, and it was great. I think I spoke to and with people from like 4 o'clock till 11 p.m. or whatever. It was loads of fun. There were lots of people there. There were also quite a few XJWs who were like, "Oh, are you going to be on the show tomorrow?" And I was like, "Yeah, I literally flew here, do this, take a nap, get on a plane, fly back, and drive straight from the airport to here." And they're like, "Oh, we're so excited. Lloyd's our favorite, and we follow everything Lloyd does." So there's like 20 people that told me to say hi.
I'm disturbed that they follow everything that I do.
Well, I don't think they know everything. People tell me they follow everything I do, and I was like, what did I do last night at 9:45?
Yeah.
You don't know.
But seriously, I think that it's really nice of the ACA to have me on, and hopefully some of the things I say will resonate with those who've had that experience. We had a whole bunch of XJWs here before. And yeah, it's just really nice to extend that hospitality, because here's the thing, it's not about what I say and my ideas. A lot of what I'm saying is just resonating with the experiences of people who've gone through the same thing. So it's just representing that whole experience.
And that's pretty much what last night was. I got a couple of quickie announcements. It's been brought to my attention that the Atheist Experience YouTube channel, where those of you who are watching right now as we talk are watching it live, has like 299,000 subscribers. And somebody said, is today the day we're going to cross the 300? Yes, it is. All of you people, if you're not already subscribing, just click the subscribe, click the like, click the bell, do whatever the hell you...
Did you just make a prophecy?
I did.
Wow.
Contact some of your friends, set up some fake accounts, whatever it takes. I've said that we will cross the 300,000 line today during this show. Do not make me wrong, because I haven't had much sleep. And no, why... What kind of guest are you? No. So I wanted to make sure we put that out so that people would know. And if you watch this after the fact, then at least we can hit it maybe before next Sunday, and we'll...
what an achievement, though. That's a massive milestone.
Yeah.
Takes a long time to get that many subscribers. So what you guys are doing, again, it's resonating with people.
Yeah, it's great. And actually, so last night, most of what Seth and I wound up talking about, and we took a lot of questions from the crowd, but we started talking about family and community, and we talked about our experiences. There were people who were like, oh, I saw the episode of the show where you read the birthday card from your mom, or I heard Seth talk about his problems, with his family. We spent a great deal of time talking about that, and it kind of dovetails with what you're going through, your experiences and your path out. But as you were saying, this is stuff that resonates with people because there's other people going through it. And one of the nicest things about last night was getting people to realize, ooh, we brought in these two, atheist, talky-faced dudes, and they're just like us, and they have to go through the same thing everybody else does. And as we would tell stories, you just watch a sea of humanists out there with their heads nodding, going, oh, yeah, that's what my Christmas was like, too. What are you getting that reception pretty much everywhere you go particularly from former Jehovah's Witnesses?
Yeah. Look, it's a... Jehovah's Witnesses are a cult hiding in plain sight. I've said that before. And the image that people have in their minds of just this nuisance on a Saturday morning, I mean, it's nowhere near the level of abuse that's being exported by this organization in multiple areas: shunning, blood transfusions, child sex abuse cover-up, domestic violence. People are really suffering because of these policies that are really the dictates of 8 men who live in a compound in upstate New York and who absolutely refuse to revisit whether those policies ought to change or be reformed. So, look, if I can just elaborate, or if I can crystallize some of this hurt and pain, so that people can think, he's giving his story, but it might as well be mine.
Right.
And I think when you and Seth do your work, I think one of the things that you really do bring to the narrative is that you know what it's like to believe fervently and passionately, and frankly, not all atheists do. So even though you get annoyed sometimes with callers who call in and they're being fairly ignorant, it's because you're doing it from a place of, I've been there. Yeah. I know what it's like to believe with certainty, and I have something to share with you.
There were a lot of great stories shared last night. There were people who had found their way out of abusive family relationships, abusive religious relationships. A lot of people were dealing with, I'm the first one in my family. I've got 5 or 6 siblings. They're all still religious. We all live in the same area. What the hell do I do? There was somebody else who was basically saying, when I found my way out, I wrote my parents a letter. And I got to talk to her for a while because, you want people to know who you are, what you think. And the thing that I didn't mention last night, which I found frustrating, I realize I'm probably shortcutting this story a little bit, but she got the, oh, we love you no matter what thing. And there was no interest to dig in on these topics. And so it was twofold. It was, we don't want to talk about this because we don't share those beliefs. But saying I love you no matter what is meant to be kind of comforting. Oh, we don't agree, but we still love you. And I know that she wasn't particularly comforted by it. And as I thought more about it last night, because her comments stayed with me even as I was falling asleep, I've always been opposed to this notion that there could even be something like unconditional love. So I will love you no matter what. What? Even if I'm torturing you, even if I tie you up in the basement, kill your entire family in front of you and start are you still going to love me then? And some of them will say yes. Because they've been taught by a religion that this is what you must do. And so in their mind, love means something completely different from what it means to me.
Yeah.
And it's not about caring and valuing someone. It's almost orthopraxy. It's the thing that you do irrespective of how you feel or what you think.
I think that the irritating or jarring thing about that statement when it's made by someone who is by parents who are in the process of shunning, let's say, an ex-Jehovah's Witness, is it's just simply not true. You don't love someone by pretending they don't exist. And that's the experience of thousands of ex-Jehovah's Witnesses. And to put this in context, I had the pleasure of being on Leah Remini's Aftermath, a special on Jehovah's Witnesses. One of my fellow panelists was a YouTuber called XJW Fifth, and he works in the courts. He's like a translator who works in the courts, and he routinely sees people who have done monstrous things, the worst things that you could imagine, and when they turn up at court for their hearing, the family are there next to them. They've done terrible, terrible things, and yet he is being shunned by his family, as am I, simply for no longer believing. It's just totally messed up.
And going through that, how do you deal with it? Is it bug you day to day, or does it gradually bug you less?
Gradually it does, yeah. I think it's like a self-preservation mechanism. You just cannot stay perpetually heartbroken. Your body, your mentality has to self-adjust after time. Otherwise, you'll just be in permanent torture. So, like in the case of my dad, I've just reconciled the fact that he doesn't want me in his life. Fine. Maybe it's a good thing that he's not in my life, because then my 2 daughters would have someone around who is maybe trying to indoctrinate them. Or normalizing things that I find grotesque. That's not to say that I wouldn't try and reconcile if he wanted to, but you try and find the positives, basically.
Yeah, if you've done, we talked about this a little bit last night about being like at a family gathering. Seth tells a story of an aunt who hadn't been around very much, and so she starts going around the table, hey, what do you do? Hey, what do you do? Hey, what? And she gets to Seth, and of course Seth is dreading the answering, what do you do for a living? And Seth's parents are dreading Seth answering what he does for a living. And he's like, oh, I do video and audio production. And he tries to kind of get it go on. But she keeps coming back to him and keeps coming back to him. And finally it clicks in his head, hang on a minute, why am I the one who's sitting here worrying about how everybody else feels? When they talked about what they were working on, none of them shied away from mentioning their church or anything else. And he just blurted out, well, I produce the #1 atheist podcast on the planet. And that really sent dinner in a different direction, but it led to something good. And you should definitely, I know Seth's talked about this before on his show, but definitely go find the episode where he talks about that, and I'll let him finish his own story. But we do that. And we hear from people all the time calling in, I don't know how to deal with family members, or I'm the only one in my family, or at Christmas time, I sit in the corner and stay quiet, and everybody else is talking about Jesus and whatever else. And of course, Christmas would have been different for you.
What's Christmas?
Yes. I'm sitting here going on,
and
and
this thing of which you speak.
I came up with this great example, and now I realize, no, it was a crap example. But no Christmas.
Yeah. And you just get, it doesn't become an issue after a while, because you just think, I'm good without it. And honestly, I'm to this day don't get that excited about Christmas, but I celebrate it for my daughter.
Sure.
Because I don't want her to have the same issue I have, which is basically that I don't have any positive memories to associate with it. But that's not going to be the case for her, because she is going to have positive memories. So.
Yeah. A couple of years ago, Beth and I did a video about it's up on my Patreon. It's called Atheist Christmas, and there's no reason to hash back through it, but Christmas is rapidly approaching, so prepare for all of the fundamentalists to claim that they're not allowed to say Christmas. Curiously, I can say it, and I do, and I'm pro-Christmas because Christmas is primarily secular. And if you stood in front of a church in July and polled people as they came out, tell me the first two things that come to your mind when I say Christmas.
Oh, it's Jesus.
If you go in July when they haven't just heard a sermon about how it's supposed to be about Jesus and they come walking out, I bet you Jesus doesn't make the top 5, because that's just the way it is.
Yeah.
It's family, presents, food, time off, and even when they start thinking about things that are iconically Christmas, you might be more likely to get, the Grinch, snowmen, other stuff, trees, decorations, all these things, because there are 2 Christmases. But it's all in the video. You can go watch that. Apart from not having Christmas, what else did you get screwed out of?
I grew up thinking that all of my schoolmates, all my school friends, were going to die imminently if they didn't join my religion, and that therefore, in addition to being at school to learn, I was actually also at school to preach, to view that as my personal territory that the congregation couldn't get access to. And so you can imagine what effect that had when young Lloyd was running around saying, oh, you want to read this book and maybe think about having a Bible study, and what that would do in a high school setting. I was bullied relentlessly. And just the whole totalistic black and white way of viewing the world, which takes a long time to shake off. We had 1 or 2 questions earlier in the speaker series about that. This is kind of coding that it embeds itself in you, and it isn't as simple as just flicking a switch and, now I see the world in a logical, rational way, and now I know Armageddon isn't going to kill me. It takes a while to process those things, and sometimes it can take years or decades to sort out all those issues.
Without going through the full story, you can get Lloyd's book, The Reluctant Apostate. I'm sure you'll go through it, but there's a question that people ask me all the time, and it's, did you have a moment or an epiphany where it all crumbled, or it all started to crumble, or was this more a gradual process?
For me, I don't think I would be in this seat now if I hadn't moved to Croatia, because I met my wife, who is Croatian, due to attending a special kind of elite school for young Jehovah's Witness men, and we had our first year reunion in my wife's congregation, and that's how I met her. So I ended up moving out to Croatia, and it was when I was in a different setting, attending meetings that weren't in the English language. It was like being disconnected. You know that scene in The Matrix where they pulled the jack out? I was no longer connected to the constant stream of indoctrination. And that just gave me the gap to start thinking, hang on, what are my beliefs? They're telling me what my beliefs should be. What do I actually believe? And it was just 2 or 3 months before I actually wrote my wife a letter and said, I think I'm on the way to becoming disassociated as a witness.
Wow. How'd you take that?
Not very well. This is the thing. I mean, these sorts of decisions, apart from being like an existential crisis of who am I,
right.
Everything that I've ever been told actually isn't true. Now I've got to figure out what's true. If you're married to someone, in addition to all of that, you've also got the question of, am I going to stay married? If we stay married, given the fact that we're still young enough to have children, do we have children? How do we raise our child if one of us stays in the religion? I think I didn't get diagnosed at the time, but I think I came as close as I can think of to having like a nervous breakdown over it all. I just remember being in a very, very dark place. But fortunately, I came out of it. And one thing that's really helped me to kind of process things is doing research and sharing what I've learned. And that obviously morphed into setting up jwsurvey.org as a resource for other ex-witnesses, writing the book, setting up my John Cedars YouTube channel, and just trying to share the knowledge as much as possible.
Well, you want to go ahead and jump into some calls for a little bit?
I think we should.
Get back to it?
Oh, there's an XJW.
Is there?
Yeah.
You want to? Let's start there.
Yeah.
We got Jim in California. You are on with Lloyd Evans.
Hello, you guys. How are you doing today?
I've switched my phone off now, so hopefully...
Yeah. We're not going to fire him.
Perfect.
Thanks so much for calling in.
Of course. Yeah, well, it's my pleasure to be on the phone with you guys. I've had the pleasure of meeting both of you in the past in different occasions. And the reason I'm calling today is because this kind of relates to what you guys are talking about. I am in a situation where my entire family is still believing JWs. I haven't been for the longest time, and they know about it. It's just that I've had a son, and he's just a year old, and they're starting to showing JW propaganda and trying to indoctrinate him, even though I've explicitly told him that I would be against that. And I'm just not sure how to handle it.
I can't tell you what to do. I can only tell you what I've done in that exact same situation. And just for those who are watching and don't understand what is meant by JW propaganda, they actually even have a pixel style cartoon series called Become Jehovah's Friends, starring these two children called Caleb and Sophia. And it's a series of lessons basically teaching children how to be Jehovah's Witnesses and teaching them, for example, to give their ice cream money to Watchtower for more Kingdom Halls to be built and that kind of thing. So some really disturbing, grotesque attempts at hijacking the minds of young children, not to be taken lightly, because we know this stuff works. It certainly worked on me when I was a child, even though we didn't have the cartoons back then. So with that in mind, my wife and I were very, very firm on this with our believing in-laws. And we said, look, you try and indoctrinate our children, you don't see our children. And that basically worked. There were one or two, you could say, relapses, but for the most part, the message is now received and understood, and they know that if they try and indoctrinate Jessica being the older one, she's then going to come and tell us what she was told, and we're going to have issue with them. So they abide by that rule, and you are perfectly in a position to lay down that rule as the child's parent.
Well, I appreciate that. My son is still fairly young, so he wouldn't be able to tell me what's going on. And my wife is supporting of teaching him all the JW teachings because she's a living Jehovah still.
Well, that complicates things.
Yeah.
That complicates things.
It does.
Because you're not the only parent, and you're not the only one that's going to have a say.
So we've had a conversation lately, and she has agreed to wait a bit until he's a bit older before she starts teaching him all the, dogma. Of course.
You see, my question would be, how is it appropriate for you to use the developmental phase of a child to drive home this knowledge? If it's true, why can't you wait till they're an adult and they have critical thinking skills? That would be my question. My
point, exactly. But it just disturbs me because it's gotten to a point where when they ask him where Jehovah is, he's pointing at the sky, even though he can't even talk. So I just don't know what to expect, if I should just stay quiet for a little longer and see how it pans out, or I just,
Again,
I don't really know what to do.
I can't tell you what to do. I can only tell you what I've done. And just as like a fail-safe in case they do try and indoctrinate Jessica, she's now at an age where I've been able to sit down with her and explain in child's terms what's at stake. And the way I ended up explaining it is that there are some, you'll laugh, but this is all true. It's just explained in a child's way. There are some bad men who live in America in a forest by a lake, because that's where the headquarters are. And they have the power to control people and stop people from loving each other. And the way that you resist the power of the bad men is by asking questions. And one of the tricks that the bad men play is to say that Jehovah is going to do things to people if they don't follow them. And again, it may seem ridiculous, but hopefully when Jessica's older, almost certainly when Jessica's older, she'll get it. She'll understand what we were explaining to her in an age-appropriate way. But I'm not saying that that's how you should do it. I'm just saying that's what worked for me.
Of course. No, I appreciate that. Thank you. I've told my wife that I just don't want her telling our son that his dad is going to die in Armageddon or anything like that, because that might be traumatizing to him.
That's a tricky one, though. I would only re-emphasize that the question then needs to be, if you're so confident that this is the truth, why are you exploiting the childhood, the developmental phase to drive this home rather than waiting for them to be an adult?
Sure. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I hope it works out for you, Jim. And I'm glad, you picked the right week to call because I've given I gave similar advice last night in Phoenix, but not with regard to Jehovah's Witness. But your situation where you're a non-believer and your wife's a believer, that complicates things. And rather than worrying about the extended family and what they may or may not do, you and your wife have to basically come to a non-Jesus meeting and sort stuff out.
Yeah, I guess it's overwhelming having a child alone, and being in this situation just only aggravates things. So I appreciate you guys' time and taking the call. I know I'm not the only one in this situation.
You absolutely are not, and thanks so much for calling, Jim.
All right. Have a lovely evening. All right.
Thanks.
Thanks, Jim. Yeah, we hear from people all the time in different situations, and if there's any other message that we could get out to anybody, it's that almost certainly, no matter how strange your situation is, you are almost certainly not the only one that's going through it. And it's one of the reasons why we often direct people to recoveringfromreligion.org, both the website and the hotline. There are people there you can talk to. There are social networks that you can get involved in, the ACA Discord, other things like that, where you can maybe find somebody and do what Lloyd's done and what other people have done, which is build a community and connect people.
A good resource for people in Jim's situation is the XJW subreddit. So if you go on Reddit and just type in XJW, EXJW, you'll find literally tens of thousands of XJWs on there. And usually, if you put a situation to them, you'll get some good advice.
We've got Alexander in Germany. You're on with Lloyd and Matt.
Hello, Lloyd and Matt. Sorry, I'm a little bit excited.
I am as well.
Me too.
What I wanted to talk about is I am an atheist, technically speaking, but I have an extreme crippling fear about death, and essentially that nothing, the chance that nothing can come after that I self-deceive myself into believing
Well,
there is an
I would say
afterlife.
you don't actually do that, because if you're going to tell me that you knowingly are deceiving yourself, then you know you're not actually deceiving yourself. So what you're really doing is convincing yourself to act as if you believe rather than actually believing.
Yeah, I could say it's more like hoping,
Yeah.
essentially.
I don't really have a problem with hope. I mean, I'd like for hope to be put on a fairly solid foundation, and for the thing that people are hoping for to at least be attainable or reasonable. I mean, I could sit here all day long and hope that I could flap my arms and fly it away to Tahiti, but we know that's not going to happen. And when it comes to an afterlife, we don't have any good evidence for an afterlife. We have mountains of evidence against it. And we know that the various afterlives that have been proposed wind up putting people in incredibly difficult positions because they don't know how to deal with life. They don't know how to deal with the death, which is the eventual consequence of life. So which afterlife are you afraid of losing or afraid of getting?
It's the interesting part about that is actually I'm not following the afterlife idea of any of the major religions on earth, but so to speak, I kind of created my own that fits my moral compass.
Convenient, cut out the middleman.
Yeah. So what? So now I'm even more confused because so you created your own afterlife and you're so afraid of it that you pretend to believe.
Well, I'm not afraid of that afterlife, but the chance of there not being an afterlife.
I think he's created a favorable afterlife because it's the death that he's afraid of.
How is this any different from having an imaginary friend because you're afraid you don't have any friends?
I would not have a quick answer on that.
Okay.
Listen, what confuses me is you say that you have a crippling fear of death. I think it's safe to say that most people aren't fond of the idea of dying. Are you able to expand a little bit on how your fear of death is more, let's say, abnormal than that of myself or Matt?
Well, my fear of death mainly is about the ceasing of my of the existence of my consciousness.
Well, how will you suffer in any way when that happens?
If my consciousness ceases to exist, that cannot possibly hurt me because I will not exist.
But I am just absolutely feared of just being forgotten and everything I know being forgotten.
Here's the thing. What concerns me is, again, fear of death is not abnormal. We all it's in our evolutionary interests to have a fear of death. If you're coming to the atheist experience saying that you have an abnormal or crippling fear of death, this becomes an issue for you to take up with trained professionals who can talk you through that. If this is causing you discomfort in your day-to-day life, a more appropriate response, rather than inventing your own religion, might be to consult with a professional who can guide you through thought techniques that can help you process these kind of what essentially are irrational fears or phobias. That seems to be what you're describing. You shouldn't come to the atheist experience. Not saying that you shouldn't have called in, but I'm saying that the most appropriate thing for you to do would be to get professional help if it's causing you discomfort in your day-to-day life.
That I'm already in the way of doing. I have also already consulted people on that.
Good.
Yeah, because I can talk to you. We could talk for the next 4 hours, and I could come up with a bunch of different examples and point out why I don't think there's anything to be afraid of, et cetera. And it doesn't change anything because you already recognize that you have an irrational fear. You recognize it so strongly that you made up something to trick yourself into believing in order to avoid worrying about that eventuality. And it doesn't do any good. You can go with the Mark Twain quote, which may or may not be from Mark Twain, but he talks about I was dead for 1 billion years before I was born, and it never troubled me one bit. And so, before you existed, that wasn't problematic after. But what's happened here is somebody has instilled in your head, the idea that there's some way that you won't die, or that you might not be able to die, or that being dead is a terrible thing. And that makes sense. Being dead seems to be a terrible thing because we look at it as, oh, I'm no longer alive, and I like being alive, and there's things about life I like, and if that stops, that would be terrible. And yes, continuing to live under certain conditions would almost always be preferable to dying. But the thing is, if I were to drop dead right now, I wouldn't know it. There's no reason to think that I would, apart from maybe during the experiencing, if it takes a little longer, but, I wouldn't experience even the process if it was done particularly quickly or anything afterwards. And so this may be tricky, and I'm with Lloyd in the sense that I encourage you to keep seeking professional help on this as well. But when I go to sleep at night and I wake up the next morning, I have no way of proving I'm the same person that I was yesterday, that I wasn't replaced with a clone, or that the universe didn't start 5 minutes ago, or thousands of little thought experiments because of the limitations of our brains and our ability to process information about the world. This is why I say I'm not absolutely certain about anything. I don't think you can get to absolute certainty about anything. I think all you can do is get to a reasonable confidence based on the available evidence. I can't prove to you I'm not in the Matrix. I can't, all of these things are essentially unfalsifiable things. And the more I would sit around and agonize over them, the worse my life is. And so maybe you inventing your own religion to kind of trick yourself into maybe quasi-tricking yourself into not being as afraid of death might even turn out to be a good thing. It may not be that far removed from what we all do on certain things because, I can't prove I'm not in the Matrix, but I'm not going to live my life as if I am. I'm going to live my life based on the rules here. When I cross the street, I'm going to look both ways. I don't begin with, how do I know that there's not an invisible bus barreling towards me when I cross the road? Those sorts of things, you could go on forever, putting up all the things that you don't know and that you can't know and letting them control your life. And so finding some way to get over that hurdle so that it's not affecting your life as much. If you can't get over it any other way, and you can make up a story that you convince yourself of that primarily just gets you so that you're not crippled by this particular fear, I'm not sure that's necessarily a bad thing, but I'm not a mental health expert, and all of my advice should be taken with like a mountain of salt.
Well, my old psychotherapist before I moved to a new city actually has advised me to use this religion, or rather alternate universe, you could say, I created, and write about it, write a book about it, even a fantasy book or something.
As Matt was talking, I was thinking it's not inconceivable that a psychotherapist would actually recommend this if things are really bad and if it's so crippling for you that it's impacting your day-to-day well-being. It's not inconceivable. I think the line that's drawn between your personal religion that you've created and religion in general is that you're not hopefully thinking of indoctrinating other people to believe what is giving you personal comfort. I think that's safe to say. I
kind of had that realization when I suggested the notion of imaginary friend. And while I don't have kids and I'm not a child psychologist, I have read recommendations from child psychologists that are like, don't freak out if your kid ends up with an imaginary friend, and definitely don't try to beat it out. Don't try to beat anything out of your kids. Just don't beat them. But also, you don't have to do no, that's not real, that's not real, that's not real, because their mind is dealing with something and they have constructed something that helps with that in some way. And by and large, we know that people with irrational fears, if they have some sort of coping mechanism, can eventually get to a point where they go away. Kids have imaginary friends, and very few adults do. Well, actually, all the theists do. But apart from theists, generally people get over these things. And we can't offer you real advice other than to keep seeking counseling and do the sort of thing that makes you not afraid all the time. And maybe one day you'll wake up and you go, wow, I've been unafraid now for a year, all because I made something up, which I don't actually believe, but I kind of pretended I believed. And then you won't need that crutch anymore.
I have to also say that on a second note, this idea of this afterlife I constructed also helps me to cope with the world we're living in, as we all, I think, know that this world is very unfair, and I have problems accepting that. And
very unfair, but more fair than it used to be. And you're calling from Germany. This is something I don't think, with all due respect to Matt and everyone else in America, that you don't understand us fully until you've been through to some of the old castles in Europe. If you walk through some of these old museums where they still have the implements of torture from, for example, the Spanish Inquisition and what have you, and the devices that were used on people to control people, we're very, very clearly living in a more equitable, fair, just time than people of past generations. So, of course, it's not going to be perfect, but I think you should hopefully be able to derive some comfort from seeing progress, at least.
And one of the things that I take comfort in, and by the way, I've been to Warwick Castle, so I've at least been to one castle.
Go to castles, people. That's the lesson here.
One thing I take away from it is that the universe doesn't give a crap about me.
Yeah.
Which also means the universe is not out to get me. Mm. And the notion that there's not somebody intentionally out to get me, that when I see inequity, when I see things that don't seem fair, et cetera, you can almost look at it as, yes, but it's equally unfair for everybody, or it's equally impartial with regard to... sometimes things happen. Some people get lucky. Some people are born wealthy. Some people are born unhealthy. Some people are born healthy. I think I'm just a little more pragmatic. And what can I do today? What can I fix today? What can I likely expect going forward? So, I mean, Alexander, we wish you all the best, and don't beat yourself up over developing a coping mechanism to try to keep from sitting around in agonizing fear all the time.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Alexander.
Appreciate it. We've got, oops, I almost pushed the wrong button and hung up on him. Tyler in Missouri, another XJW calling in.
It's an XJW extravaganza.
Ooh. How you doing, Tyler?
Hello. Good, how are you?
Not too bad.
Lloyd, I am a very recent fan of yours, and Matt, you as well. And I was calling in to see, Lloyd, if you could share your opinion on disassociating versus fading. I have woken up within about the last month and a half after being shunned for 3 years, and I can't really decide if I want to continue putting up with the social pressure of the calls and waiting for somebody to show up at my door, or the stress that might come between me and my parents if I were to disassociate.
Yeah. If we could, just because I would imagine most people listening have never had to dealt with this, can't imagine it. Can we kind of paint a picture of what Tyler's going through and what the process is?
So what Tyler is describing here is the dilemma that all XJWs really face, which is, do I fade or do I disassociate? Now, disassociation is where you officially part company. You basically excommunicate yourself from the religion, and that obviously brings with it the penalty of being shunned by everyone that you care about who is a believer. Fading is where you try and avoid that scenario by simply slipping off the radar. Because in theory, as long as you're not saying anything negative about the organization, as long as you're literally just no longer attending the meetings and not practicing, you can, in theory, maintain contact, although in practice that doesn't always work, because you will usually be shunned anyway as bad association because you're not setting a good example. So you're kind of in, it's which of these two bad situations do I want to choose? So Tyler's wondering which to choose, and the simple answer is that no one can choose that but you, Tyler. You know how this is affecting you psychologically and emotionally. You know how much you're able to handle. Some people in your situation are able to handle quite a lot, others not so. And if you are living in constant fear of elders showing up at your door, which they will do, by the way, if they hear that Tyler's done something that breaches the many, many rules that witnesses live by, then it may be prudent to sever ties, because it sounds like you're being shunned already. And really the only reason why you would want to keep a foot in the door is to avoid shunning. Well, if they've already arranged that for you one way or the other, then that might factor into your decision.
Right. Well, I guess that's very helpful. I appreciate it.
But I do feel for you. And the thing to remember is, as we were saying before, you are absolutely not alone. Try as much as you can not to go through this by yourself. If you've not already jumped on the XJW subreddit, please do so, because there are people there that want to hear your story and give you advice. And there's tons of resources out there, but the important thing to know is that you're not going through this by yourself. As you're telling your story on the Atheist Experience, there are undoubtedly hundreds of others who are thinking to themselves, well, he's describing my exact situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, thank you very much. It's great to talk to somebody that understands.
I had a quick question, Tyler.
Matt?
Have you got anybody in your area that you can talk with and interact with? I mean, it's fine to, and by all means, check out the Reddit and check out Recovering from Religion and everything else. Have you made connections with anybody outside of the JW community to interact with?
I got my boss at work is pretty understanding, and I had a bit of an episode at work one day, the night after I was welcomed back into the congregation after being disfellowshipped for 3 years, and got to talk to him about it some. But aside from that, really, I called my sophomore year history teacher and talked to him about it. But this is my first time really talking to both of you obviously understand to some degree.
It's a really hard struggle re-establishing that sense of community that you have as a Jehovah's Witness. It's possibly the hardest thing, the hardest challenge that you face when you're extricating yourself from the religion. But the fact that it's hard doesn't mean it's impossible. It just means that you really do have to put in time and effort. But there are people out there who, once they know you, will value you for who you are. Yeah. And will, as we said before, love you unconditionally, rather than saying, well, we'll love you if you will accept our beliefs and think the same way that we think. So it's just a case of persevering, being patient, knowing that you're not alone, and knowing that in time you will rebuild that community that you've lost.
If you don't mind, and you don't have to answer this at all, but where in Missouri are you roughly?
In a major metropolitan area, St. Louis.
Okay. Oh, okay. Well, I went to high school in St. Charles, and
I know.
While I'm not coming up there this year for Christmas because I have other stuff to do, I do make it up there on occasion. So drop me an email. You can email tv@atheist-community.org. If you want it just to go to me personally, you can go do president@atheist-community.org. I may be able to put you in touch with people in the St. Louis area where you can at least have some place to go and detox and hang out if the stress level gets too high. And next time I'm up there, if there's time, we go out and I don't know. I don't drink coffee, but
He does have lollipops. He might share his lollipops with you.
I do, and I worked really hard to get these. But yeah,
I really appreciate that. I'll make sure to do that.
Yeah, I wish you all the best. Reach out, and I know there are people in your area that you can connect it with, but there's a lot going on, and trying to do it on your own is just going to make it harder.
Right. Well, I appreciate it. Thank you both very much.
Thanks, Tyler.
Hang in there, Tyler.
Yeah, I can preach a sermon about these lollipops, actually. So it turns out I'm diabetic, and so in order to stop eating so much junk food, I started killing my sugar rush with like Jolly Ranchers or something that would last a long time, but I don't get quite as much sugar. And Mark's probably out there shaking his head at me right now, but I can't see him. But in the variety bag, they have lollipops, and they have the pink lemonade flavor. And I'd never had them, never heard of them. They're the best of all the flavors of Jolly Ranchers.
Are you saying that objectively or subjectively?
Well, it's subjective, but if you disagree, you're friggin' wrong. But if you buy like a big bag of them, you might only get 5. And I found somebody who buys the big bags, then sorts them out by flavors, and will sent me a bag of 90 of these, and they're all pink lemonade.
Does it not concern you that they don't go off over such a long time that they can have 90 in a bag?
Oh, they're terrible for me anyway. 90 in a bag, that might only last a few weeks. We'll see. You never know.
Maybe a couple of days.
Not quite sure yet. We've got John in Georgia. You're on with Lloyd and Matt.
Hey, Matt. Lloyd, how y'all doing, man?
Not bad.
Not bad.
Hey, Lloyd, I called Talk Heathen Audio, and you didn't give me a hard time. I think this will not be a little different.
Well, I'm just getting started, so don't push me.
Okay.
Well, it said here the call screener's got a note saying you want to know why atheists characterize faith negatively and that we all have faith.
Yeah, well, I mean, let's just get right to it. How would you define faith, Matt?
Faith is the excuse people give for believing something when they don't have a good reason.
Okay, I appreciate that, but you don't think you have faith?
Okay, so here's my thing with faith. Faith gets you to absolutely any religious conclusion. If you're going to base your beliefs on faith, why would you possibly have a justification for choosing one religion over another? This is the thing that irritates me about the excuse that you often hear from Jehovah's Witnesses when you explain to them why the beliefs are absurd, why the beliefs don't work. It will all boil down to, oh, well, we just have to have faith. Well, if you just have to have faith, why are you a Jehovah's Witness? Why aren't you a Mormon? Why don't you believe that Joseph Smith found some golden plates and then interpreted them into a book and then conveniently lost them? You may as well be any religion. You know, just pick one. Pick one that you like. That's not how we get to meaningful truth conclusions.
Yeah, so when you asked me to define faith, I gave you the definition that I tend to use. I realize there are others. I've done debates on faith before. And what a lot of theists will say is, some of them will go to like Hebrews 11:1, but others would just, their view of faith is, I believe something in the absence of absolute certainty, and therefore we all have faith. Like you have faith that this chair will hold you, Matt. You're sitting in a chair. You have faith that the chair will hold you up, and my answer is no. I have a reasonable confidence that the chair will hold me up based on evidence. I'm not absolutely certain that this chair will hold me up. I'm not sitting down saying, ooh, I have faith that there is a chair. I can see it, I can investigate it, and everything else. And so, by and large, when we're talking about faith, no matter how people define it, what they often mean is they use faith as the reason for their belief because they don't have a good reason. Because for anything else, if you ask somebody, why do you believe this? They give a reason. And it's not limited merely to religious people. There are people I've debated in the secular community, and you ask them question A and you get an answer. Question B, you get an answer. Question C, you get an answer. And then question D, I just kind of have faith. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't have presuppositions. I do. I have to presuppose logic and reason. I have to presuppose that I'm sharing a reality with other people because it's something that is unfalsifiable. But apart from that, when people appeal to faith as a reason for believing something about reality, it just means they don't have a good reason.
Well, number one, I do see where I live at. When you said if you ask people why do you believe, they do not have a good reason. So I know what you're talking about there, and I agree with you. But I would like to go back to the chair analogy, if I could.
Okay.
And maybe I would like to give another one, and I hope it doesn't get laughs, and YouTube don't go crazy. But and I'm not going to.
I wouldn't place money on that, but go ahead.
Yeah, I mean you're right. I'm not going to use the way comfort one. It's going to sound like it. I think, Lloyd, you have kids.
Yeah.
So are you married?
Yeah.
Okay. Are you with your wife 24/7?
No.
No. So there are times when your wife is not with you. So how
And
do you
now,
know
as
she's
we
not
speak,
cheating?
she isn't with me.
Oh, okay. So how do you know she's not cheating on you? You don't, correct?
You don't.
You don't know that she's not cheating on you.
So he's not absolutely certain that his wife isn't cheating on him. But did you ask him? The right question to ask is, Lloyd, do you think your wife is cheating on you right now?
I have absolutely no reason to conclude that.
Yeah. He's not saying he's absolutely certain she didn't. He's not saying I believe she's not. It's that is absurd because I have nothing that would convince me that is going on. You would need to present evidence that she is cheating in order for me to believe it. And he has a track record with his wife.
Exactly.
So he has a reasonable expectation based on data from the past. That is not, you can call that faith all day long, but it's not the same as the faith people use to when they're talking about religion, because you don't have any data.
John.
No, but
John,
that's everyday faith, though, isn't it?
as when you called in for Talk Heathen, I'm interested in answering your question as efficiently as possible. And in the show notes, your screening call was characterized as you saying, we all have faith, you do too. Are you saying that atheists have faith?
Yes, sir, I am. I mean,
In what?
I think, well, especially if you have kids, we all might say, I have faith in you. Just a simple, silly statement like that.
Let me ask you this. Let's say we lined up 10 people, and all of them had faith by your definition.
Mm-hmm.
Are they all on equal footing? Does the thing that I believe on faith, is that just as justified as what Lloyd believes on faith, and is that just as justified as the next one? Or is every application of faith equivalent?
Oh, no, sir, no, sir.
Cool. Then it doesn't matter if we all have faith. What matters is the specific type of faith that we're talking about. And when we ask people to tell us what they believe and why, when they say, I just have faith, they are refusing to give a good reason. If you ask, do you think your wife is cheating on you, or do you think that chair will support you, we give a reason. And if you want to call it faith all day long, now you're just playing word games. And this is an example of what's called the tu quoque fallacy. So do you. And so for years, religious people have been like, oh, you just got faith, and faith's garbage. And then you need to make up an argument that says, well, you have faith too, but now you've defeated your own argument because you just acknowledge that whatever it is that I may or may not have faith in, it's not equivalent to the faith that religious people are appealing to. So if they're not equivalent, then it's irrelevant. You might as well have said, well, you eat dinner too.
I think I see what you're talking about, and I would concede that when you ask the normal people about why they believe in God, not only do they not have a reason, they have a very sad non-reason. So I think,
Thank you for answering your own question. You've just called it a non-reason.
Do you have a good reason?
Well, my reason for believing in God, and, it's kind of bigger than believing in God, because I don't think my reason gets you to the Bible. Basically, I just think there's a creator to all of this. Now, that does not get you to the Bible. I understand that.
Well, it doesn't get you anywhere. You just said, I think there's a creator to all this. And what that's what you believe. We're asking why you believe it. Why do you believe there's a creator?
And you said, I hope, correct me if I've misinterpreted you, did you just say that faith is a non-reason?
No. I said when you ask the normal people, they will give you non-reason. And like Matt said, they will say that's their faith, but I'm saying, no, that's not faith.
Okay. So what good reason do you have for believing there's a creator?
Yeah, so thank you for asking me. Well, of course, the design, I see design everywhere.
No, you see the appearance of design. Design needs to be demonstrated, not just observed and inferred. Because
I was going to say I understand.
Well, isn't it possible, John? Isn't it possible that you could look at something and say, clearly that was designed, and then find out later you were wrong and it wasn't designed?
I would say it's possible, but probable when the thing I'm looking at has a lot of qualities of design. Probably not plausible.
What are the qualities of design? How do we recognize design, John?
Well, every example we give, Matt, and I don't want to make you mad.
You couldn't possibly make me mad because I can hang up and go on to somebody
He's
else.
had his lollipops. It's fine.
Well,
I've got my here. I'll put it in and shut up.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, every example we can give of something, I'll put it like this: every example that evolutionists, Darwinian evolutionists give of the Darwinian evolution comes with a design mechanism. For example, if you say cars evolve over time, yeah, but cars had a designer. So
Okay,
that does not make sense.
I hate to do this, John. I got to stop you because you said something about every example that people would give for Darwinian evolution has elements of design. That's simply not true. Design implies an intention, and that's the exact opposite of evolution. But when you started to give an example, you talked about the evolution of cars, which is not biological evolution.
Well, I understand it, but that's the example that I hear anyway. And maybe you're right. Maybe I have just not hard, better example. But maybe Aaron Noir was given the example of I don't know if it was the cars or something, but.
Well, I think Lloyd and I would both agree. I would think Lloyd and I would both agree that cars are designed. Do you know why we know cars are designed? Why we were convinced of that?
Because we've saw it and we've done it ourselves.
Yeah, we can investigate and find out who designed it. And every example of a car has a history that we can trace back to a human mind that designed it, as far as we know. And we have no examples of cars coming into being or altering on their own into new models of cars. So the car process isn't evolution. It is changes being made by people. That's fundamentally different from biological evolution, which is a self-replicating gene and a process of reproduction that is unguided, and it's natural selection that acts upon it to say you survive and pass on and you don't.
John, I have a question. On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being not very confident and 10 being extremely confident, how confident are you that you actually understand fully how evolution works?
Oh, that's a great question, and I don't understand it fully. I have a lot of questions. I would put it at maybe a 5.
Okay, well, that being the case, would it not be prudent to hear what the other side is, hear what scientists are saying? Because let's face it, scientists have devoted their lives and careers to studying this field of science. I'm assuming there are no other fields of science that you take issue with, other than just this specific field that happens to contradict belief in God. So if I were in your shoes, I would want to fully understand what the claims being made by scientists are and how they have reached this conclusion about evolution before I started kind of saying, well, clearly it's nonsense. I'm not saying that that's how you're phrasing it. I'm saying that, there seems to be a process here that you're maybe skipping.
Oh, absolutely. You're correct. We should all know as much as we can about the other side, so I agree.
Mm.
Yes.
And a good example, like comparatively speaking, how much do you know about the germ theory of disease?
I would put that as a 0.
Yeah, and yet you go to a doctor, right?
Yes.
And the doctors will prescribe medicine for you, and I'm assuming that you will take the doctor's advice, maybe get a second opinion, but follow those people that are prescribing medication to treat illness.
Yes.
Well, once upon a time, if we had the atheist experience 1,500 years ago and people were able to call in, they would be calling in to explain the demon model of disease and that illnesses are caused by God and demons, their influence on all of this. And until we had the germ theory of disease, we wouldn't have had a really good response to it. And so they would be calling in and saying, look, clearly when Matt got the vapors or when, he had this dissociative thing, that's a demon in there. We need to cast that out. We need to have an exorcism. We need to do all of these things. Yet I don't get those calls ever. All I get calls about within the realm of science pretty much is evolution. And it's because fundamentally people are starting to realize, or have been taught, they don't fully grasp it, but they realize that if, in fact, the diversity of life is explained by purely mechanical, chemical processes, then there's no need for a God. And this is terrifying. It's every time we shut the door on something that God supposedly did or could do, religion freaks the fuck out and decides, hey, well, now there's a new gap here. I need to find a new gap to stick my God in because I desperately need to cling to this. And every single time we've learned more about how things work, we've gotten further and further away from supernatural claims and gods. Now, that's something we all know, and that's an important trend. It doesn't mean there isn't a God. It doesn't mean that we won't ever find one. It doesn't mean that evolution is, the evolution by natural selection is necessarily the absolute truth or anything else. But you have to weigh all of that and say, hang on, I don't understand germ theory of disease, but I'll take my doctor's advice. And I understand evolution just a little bit better than that. But there are people who understand this way better than me, and they're not reaching the same conclusions I am. Maybe I should, as Lloyd suggested, go study what the experts are actually saying and not just go, gosh, it really feels like there's design and a creator. Because it may be that while you are reaching that conclusion, you are fundamentally unqualified to reach that conclusion and just unaware of it.
Oh, I would agree with that, Matt, but I think what you just said would be a perfect example for me. The germ theory is correct, but the bacteria that's in us making us sick stays bacteria. I'm sure you've heard 1,000 times macroevolution does not prove macro. Macro.
I'm gonna let you go, John, because I've had a long day. And you just ignored everything I said and tried to flip it on its head all in about 10 seconds. There's no macroevolution and microevolution are distinctions that are made by creationists. Evolution doesn't discriminate. It operates at the genetic
what you've
level.
done is, rather than listening to what Matt said and accepting his argument or answering his argument, you've just switched onto a new argument without really. So if when Matt gives you an explanation, you just ignore it and move on to something else, then there isn't really any point in having a conversation, is there?
Well, I'm sorry that we got here, but thank you all for taking my call.
Sure. Kenny in Oklahoma, you're up next, and I've already put you live, but I wanted to remind people, thank you, Lloyd, for coming down. We still got some time left on this day's show. We're broadcasting from the Atheist Community of Austin's Free Thought Library at 1507 West Koenig Lane. Any atheist or atheist center, the person's welcome to come down. There's a bunch of people on the other side of the glass and people out back. We have dinner after the show. It's free. You can come by and get it. You can make donations so that, we don't go broke buying everybody dinner. I don't have details on what's coming yet, but by the time I'm done uttering these words, we are going to have Chinese food.
I love Chinese.
The voice of God in my ear there.
A voice came over, just said, Chinese.
Yes. But also the library's open 7 days a week, roughly from 11 to 9. If you ever get here to the library and it's supposed to be open and it's not, don't freak out. We'll have a number up, or you can email or contact, because occasionally, we're all pretty much volunteers here. And sometimes wires get crossed or somebody isn't able to make it. Wednesdays are usually the day that's most likely going to be problematic for people. But by all means, if you're in the Austin area, whether you live here or you're traveling through or you're here on business, you're here for an ACL festival or whatever else, stop by and at least say hi and let us know, hey, I saw the show and just wanted to stop by and see the library and notice that it's way smaller than I expected it was going to be or whatever. Because there is a community here that we have built, and I say we in the sense of everybody else other than me, because I'm off running around all over the place, and I love showing up here and seeing how there's new faces here all the time. And so I wish this thing was available in Missouri where Tyler was. I wish we need to encourage the building of more organizations like this. I love the work that you're doing. And you don't have to make an atheist community. You can make your group about whatever it needs to be about, and as big or as small as it needs to be. You can have an XJWs of, Cedar Park if you want to, where you and 4 of your former XJW friends get together and talk about, the latest techniques in shunning that your family has decided to foist on you. But I want to remind everybody about the dinner. There's a number of things coming up. The ACA's board meeting is Tuesday night at the building, and I'm sure there's something else I forgot to announce. Have we hit the 300,000 subscribers on YouTube mark yet? Has anybody checked that? Because it'd really be cool if it happened before the show was over.
Or is it a false prophecy?
All right. I just said, as long as it happens before next weekend, because some people don't watch this today.
Now you're moving the goalposts.
I know. I said that earlier. Because not everybody watches live. Some people
the
have to
viewers
watch
will
it
decide on that. Right. Yeah.
Well, in any case, I cannot be wrong. Please don't make me wrong. That would hurt me. Kenny in Oklahoma, you're on with Lloyd and Matt. How are you?
Oh, fine. I want to make sure you could hear me. I had my phone on mute, and I'm not sure this new phone's
loud and clear.
We hear you just fine.
Pretty clear? Good. And I just had a phone call. Hang on my other phone. Now it's all gone. Okay,
isn't it annoying when phone calls happen at inopportune times?
Yeah, phone calls during a phone call. It's pretty... Well, anyway, I called in last Sunday and really enjoyed it. A young lady was there, and she was very polite, very kind. I'm sure she has a lot of friends on both sides of the fence, whether they're theistic or atheist. And I asked her a question about why is it true that I've got to give a explanation for something that, Carl Sagan's, I believe the quote came up on the program that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. I'm just wondering if the vast majority of the people in the world, if it's ordinary for people to be spiritual, religious, and believe in the supernatural.
You're confusing the claims, though.
Whether or not it should be even considered extraordinary in the first place.
No. You're confusing what the claim is, Kenny. It's not extraordinary that people believe weird shit. That's not extraordinary. It's not extraordinary that people believe in a God. We know. You don't even have to prove it. You don't have to provide any evidence. I'm aware that people believe in a God. I used to. Lloyd used to. I meet people all the time and talk to them. It's not the belief in the God that is the extraordinary claim. It is that there is a God is extraordinary.
Well, I think that, I got to stop looking at the television set with the delay and everything. What I was talking about, I was using the word in a straightforward, commonplace way, and it's even been acknowledged by child psychologists and cultural anthropologists and people that, religion is extremely commonplace, always has been. It's not just an ancient phenomenon to think that way. And extraordinary does mean common, above commonplace.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Why are you talking about all these people who say religion is common? That's not an extraordinary... No, we agree. He came out of a religion. I came out of a religion. Religion is extraordinarily common. I just got done explaining to you that it's not the fact that people believe in a God. It's not the fact that people are religious. It's not the fact that people have hair. None of those things are extraordinary.
The fact that there's one of me and 8.5 million Jehovah's Witnesses doesn't make the 8.5 million Jehovah's Witnesses correct about the state of the universe.
The claim that there is a God, the claim that there is a God is the one that is the extraordinary. No, it's not ordinary.
Not true, but ordinary. There's a difference between the two words.
Are you going to let me talk, or am I going to hang up on you? Okay. It's not extraordinary for people to claim there's a God, but it's extraordinary for there to be a God. That is the claim that is extraordinary. The claim that there's something supernatural. That's what needs to be demonstrated. It's fundamentally different to say, I've got a $20 bill in my wallet than it is to say, I have $5 billion in a bank account. Even though we know that those are possible, one of them is more extraordinary than the other. When we have something where we have zero examples, zero confirmed examples supported by arguments and evidence of something occurring, like I have an invisible pet dragon in my garage, to go with Sagan, that is an extraordinary claim. And theists are arguing that they have a friend or an associate or something that they point to that exists outside of space and time, whatever that means, and has immense powers, and yet they can demonstrate none of this. That is an incredibly extraordinary claim.
I can understand why somebody who subscribes to some form of naturalism, like philosophical, metaphysical, or methodological, would look at this as a strange or extraordinary claim. But I'm not necessarily applying methodological naturalism to
I know.
everything.
We both know that. That is not a surprise.
You never had to utter that.
Yeah.
Right. And so,
But also, I'd point out that it's not us exercising methodological naturalism has nothing to do with how extraordinary the God claim is. Because what you're trying to do there is suggest that we, because we have this devotion to naturalism, have ruled out a God. And that is utterly dishonest, because I'm not a naturalist in the sense that some people would describe, and I didn't rule out a God because I believe in naturalism. I do not accept that there is a God because there is insufficient evidence for it. So setting aside whether or not you're a naturalist or anything else, is there evidence for a God, and is it sufficient to justify the specifics of the claim?
Great. No, that's exactly what I thought I would hear. And what evidence are you asking for if you're not asking for naturalistic evidence?
I don't know. You'd have to, first of all, describe the God, give its characteristics, and tell us what evidence there is.
But this is the thing with you have theism, you're a theist. You also have deism. So a deist will say, well, the universe has an intelligent beginning. It's just not interested in what's happening on our planet. Theists, including you, say, not only does the universe have an intelligent beginning, I can tell you that entity's characteristics, its personality, what things it likes, what things it doesn't like, what books it's inspired, what religions it's inspired. There's a whole bunch of claims attached there, and you have selected this particular God and dismissed a whole bunch of other gods on entirely subjective grounds, which I would hazard a guess are probably influenced by the culture that you were raised in more than anything.
Well, I want to congratulate you, Lloyd, on pinning the tail on the donkey falsely here by labeling me as being subjective when I haven't given you any indication I am subjective about it.
Sorry, it says T on the call, so T stands for theist. So you're telling me you're not a theist?
Theist isn't subjective. That's an assumption on your part.
What objective evidence can you provide for the God?
Okay. Well, I think it's a really good idea when you're looking at evidence of whether or not God exists, or whether or not you can actually talk to someone's mindset in a way that they would get it and understand it. First of all, you have to have good communication. And so we're going to have to be natural a little bit here. So because you wouldn't characterize yourself necessarily.
Can you skip the preamble? I've got 6 lines of people and a whole bunch of people who are eating Chinese food. All I asked for was evidence.
Okay. Well, pointing to the God of the Old Testament, I believe
that's a good one to
one
pick.
God source of all, one God Father of all exists because in 17 instances of Scripture, you've got Hebrew verb describing that God stretches out the heavens with a beginning time and that it continues like a curtain, like the space is like an elastic solid or something. You've even got medieval times, you've got inflation even in the Kabbalah. It's clearly spelled out there. God contracted his spirit. The seed of the universe was born. He relaxed the contraction. The universe expanded. It says that literally in the Kabbalah, so you don't have to be a scientist to believe in inflation.
It also says that plants were around before there was light. Or sorry, before there was the sun.
Whether or not those parts are talking about stages of creation or not, and I'm not arguing that.
So here's the thing.
On the 17 verses of Scripture spread all over the...
Why should we care about 17 verses of Scripture that people interpret in a specific way after they find out what reality is?
Well, I cannot argue that inference is as clear as Scripture always. Human inference can have error. But in the case that you want to identify a specific God, you're going to have to make him compatible to that religion and its documents.
I find it curious that you say specific God and then follow that up with you're going to have to make him. Because
I'm going to have. When I say you're, I'm speaking collectively.
Nobody. No, you're missing the point, Kenny. Nobody has to make God anything. Nobody has to make God anything. You believe in a God, and we asked for what objective evidence do you have, and you go to Scripture and interpretations of Scripture, which is not objective.
From your favorite religion.
Okay, in science, astrophysics, the consensus is that dark energy is a thing that is causing the inflation of the universe. It's constantly being used, yet it's not we're not constantly running out of it. Also, we can't identify what it is. We can't see it.
Right. I agree. I completely agree. We can't. Hang on, Kenny. Hang on, Kenny. Hang the fuck on. I agree. We don't know what it is. We don't know much about it. You're talking about speculative physics that isn't resolved. You don't get to stick your God in and claim that your God's responsible for that. You don't get to say there's something science doesn't understand, and therefore my God is responsible for it. That's not objective evidence for it. That's you filling a gap with God.
Even though the energy itself has the same characteristics as God?
What characteristics is God? We don't even know what the characteristics of the energy are. I tell you what.
That's the point.
Bye.
But
that's the point.
I love it when
we don't know.
I love it when they cite science.
Yeah.
Here's all this science.
As if I gathered the 10 world's best experts in dark matter, how many of them are going to think that dark matter proves God?
Yeah.
You don't know what the hell you're talking about, Kenny. When you're talking about speculative theoretical physics. By the way, we have a Big Bang model. We have the common model of the Big Bang cosmology. Science doesn't say that's true. It just says it is currently the best model we have to explain the expansion of the universe. It's not making a declaration of truth. If we find something new and interesting, maybe there's dark matter, maybe there's not. Maybe there's dark energy, maybe there's not. Maybe we fundamentally have misunderstood something. We are still exploring and trying to understand the universe. And what you're doing is saying, oh, let me give you some objective evidence for God. And you start talking about dark matter.
Based on my subjectively chosen religion.
Yeah. I should hang up at that point. Because neither of us are physicists. At least I assume you're not a physicist.
Well, actually.
It would be a mistake for me to assume that. And I guarantee you Kenny's not a physicist.
Yeah, that much is clear.
But the physicists were all cringing every time you uttered a new word. So when you come up with your dark energy, dark matter proves God paper and submit it to a peer-reviewed journal and get your Nobel Prize, call back and tell me what a jackass I was for hanging up on you. But until then, there's a gap in our knowledge, and you tried to stick your God in it when we asked for objective evidence, and so it's just as subjective as Lloyd accused you of doing, which you thought was going to be wrong. And this will be actually an interesting follow-up because we got Steve in Washington. How are you?
Hey, what's up?
It says here that you want to know why we believe in science and is it credible?
Yeah, like not every aspect of I'm asking specifically for as like you just talked to the last call about dark matter and stuff like that. Like that aspect, why do you believe what you believe, and what makes that evidence credible?
So it's not the findings of science that I necessarily believe. And by the way, we don't always have a finding. We may still be exploring. It is the method of science that is the single most consistently reliable method of discerning the true facts of the universe that anybody has ever come up with. These processes are self-correcting, self-checking, not on their own. I mean, people do it when we find errors. And all the times when we found mistakes in scientific findings, we found it by doing more and better science. At no point has any religious proclamation shown an error in science. And this is so telling that when Kenny calls in, he uses the expansion of the universe, a finding of science, and then interprets a passage written in Hebrew as if they knew and understood or were inspired by God to reveal that God expands the universe like a curtain. Science, until somebody comes up with some other way of examining and coming up with good models about the universe, it's the best we've got. And our confidence in the findings of science should be proportional to the evidence, tentative and subject to change when we find the sort of data that should revise it. And also, I have no better option. So do you have a better option than science for us to rely on?
As far as what you're looking for, not at all. And me being a Christian, let me say this, if I may. The problem with guys like Kenny and William Lane Craig, you cannot take the Bible and then try to use science to reason with it because they're contradictory.
Can I ask something real quick, Steve? You said a second ago something about what I was looking for. And now you have a problem with what William Lane Craig and Kenny do. By all means, set up a conference call with Craig and Kenny, and you guys sort out what the truth of your theism is, and then call me back. But what is it that you think I'm looking for that science is good for, but you have a better method?
No, well, I was like you believe. I agree about the scientific method, the method. But what I was concerned with is why do you believe, like, you know, like space, you know, the dark matter stuff.
Did I say that I believe? What do I believe about dark matter, Steve?
Well, don't let me put words in your mouth.
Yeah,
that's why
I haven't said a thing about it. As a matter of fact, I'm on record for saying that string theory is pretty much magic. That I piss off a lot of physicists. I don't know enough about it, so I'm not making proclamations. But based on what I've read and what I've studied a little bit, I'm not convinced that it's anything other than us fooling ourselves with math to some extent when we start talking about those things. But I'm not an expert. So the things that I believe are things that I've become convinced of because I am compelled by the evidence and the method that produced that evidence. That's it. So what is it what is something that I believe that you think I shouldn't?
And actually, tagging on to that, can I just...
Yeah, I got a clear understanding on what you're saying now as far as... So basically, you really actually... Like, you're like one of the first people I talk to who say they believe atheism, and it's genuinely a lack of belief and not an actual... Well, I do believe this because of, you know, whatever reason. You really just have a lack of belief and expect somebody else to, you know, come up with a methodology.
Well, it depends on the gods and everything. So, you know, there are gods that I'm not convinced exist. There are also some gods that I'm convinced don't exist. I am convinced Zeus does not exist. Sorry, friends.
Right.
Steve, could I just revisit your original question that you called in, because we have some notes in front of us. Here's what we're looking at.
Okay.
Why do you believe in science? Is it credible? You ask why my beliefs are justified. How about you? Let's drill down to this. Specifically, what areas of science do you believe are not credible?
Certain aspects of space. You know, stuff that they believe is that they say is possible.
Well, we need you to be way, way, way more specific. We're going to ask what findings of science you object to. Certain aspects of space that they say is possible tells us nothing.
All right, like this living in space, like the space station. I've tried many aspects to try to see it myself. You know, go visit.
Whoa! I'm trying to. I swear, Steve, I just want to understand. Are you suggesting that there's not a space station and people can't live on a space station?
If the space station is actually in space, I don't see how it's possible, given the fact that
you realize Earth is in fucking space, right?
In space.
You do realize we live on a planet that is in space. And when we built something on that planet and included portions of the atmosphere from this planet and moved it just outside of our atmosphere so that now it's also in space but not in clay, what is it about this that is scientifically impossible?
Well,
do you believe that you can go scuba diving and go underwater and breathe with an apparatus?
If you take the appropriate gear, yes.
Okay. You don't think the astronauts have the appropriate gear to breathe?
No, I have. That's.
I refuse to waste Lloyd's time on taking that call any further at all. Wow.
What do you do with that? What do you do with that?
Can we get Kenny back?
Yeah, come back, Kenny. All is forgiven.
Or maybe even G-Man at this point. Kevin in Alaska, you are on with Lloyd and Matt.
Hey, guys. How you doing?
Not bad, thank you.
Yeah, I'll just skip that question. Tell us what you got.
Okay, I actually don't really have a question. I mean, we can talk about a lot of things, but really what I wanted to do was clear up a question that I hear Matt ask quite a bit.
Okay.
It's referring to Paul in the Bible.
Sure. Why is the Damascus Road experience good enough for Saul, but not for the rest of us? Yeah.
I'm sorry, my niece was making noise. What did you say?
Why is the Damascus Road experience good enough for Saul, but not for the rest of us? Why won't God reveal himself to all? Yes.
Yeah. Why? Well, here's the answer, and I think, to be honest, it seems pretty obvious to me.
Okay. It seems obvious to me, too, by the way. I think I know what the answer is, and it's obvious to me, but I'm going to let you give yours.
All right. So wouldn't Paul be the most obvious choice? If Christ was to reveal himself to anybody?
No. So basically,
why?
So I can tell you.
Is this based on Paul's writings, by the way? On how he describes himself, he'd be the most obvious choice.
So you're still looking at Paul as somebody who, or Saul as somebody who persecuted Christians, and it seems obvious that that's who God would reveal himself to, right?
Right.
So why? So if that's the reason. The reason I say no, he's not the most obvious person to reveal himself to, is because you're picking somebody who's relatively unknown and unheard of when there's almost nobody on the planet. I would think God revealing himself to Richard Dawkins would actually be far better than revealing himself to Saul, because in the case of Dawkins, you have an eminent scientist who's been an outspoken opponent of religion of all types for a long time, who has a bigger audience at this time to start with. You know, Saul didn't have a huge audience. Saul's audience grew. And now we live in a modern day and age where we have the benefits of things that Saul could have never understood, arguments and evidence that have moved society forward. So it would seem to me that it would be much better, if you were a wise God, to reveal yourself to Dawkins. However, that's still an incredibly stupid God, because God could reveal himself to everybody, and then there would be no need. Because if Dawkins calls me tomorrow and says God revealed himself to him last night, I'm not going to be convinced.
Right, not everybody would.
Nobody should.
Understood.
Nobody should.
Well, maybe nobody should, but a lot of people are.
I agree. Nobody should, right, but a lot of people are. Thank you for describing our objection to religion.
The obvious episode of the Atheist Experience.
So go ahead.
No. I mean, believe I was an atheist all my life. I grew up as an atheist.
And you're not now.
Recently.
And you're not now.
Was that?
And you're not now?
I'm not now, no.
Cool.
Until recently.
Then can we set that aside? Can we set the other stuff aside for a second? Because every time somebody tells me they were an atheist and they're not now, I have two questions that I like to ask them. Why?
Yeah, what do I believe and why do I believe it?
No. Why were you an atheist?
Why? Because there was no logical reason to believe in a God.
Kurt, so what is the logical reason that convinced you there is a God?
I mean, it could be a long story.
Logical reasons typically aren't a long story.
I had an experience. Was that?
Oh, you had an experience. Is that a logical reason?
Basically, God revealed himself to him, not to anyone else.
In a certain way, in a certain manner.
In what way? In what manner? In what way? In what manner did God reveal himself to you?
Okay, well, I'm going to have to give you some background on the story, however. So
I don't need the story. There's literally, so you don't, it's really simple. How did God reveal himself to you? Did you hear a voice? Did you see God?
If I told you God revealed himself to me in a bowl of cereal, would you believe me?
No, I wouldn't believe you, but I would at least start with that if that's your explanation. Did God reveal himself to you in a bowl of cereal?
Well,
I need to know which cereal it was. Please.
It was
cornflakes.
So God, are you seriously saying God revealed himself to you in a bowl of cereal?
It sounds completely ridiculous, doesn't it?
I'm asking you if that's what you're seriously saying.
Yeah,
okay. Kevin, I swear to the God that you fucking believe in, I'm just trying to ask simple questions so we can get somewhere before the show's over. So you were an atheist because there was no logical reason to believe. And when I ask what the logical reason is, you say God revealed himself to you in a bowl of cereal. Now there's going to be a follow-up question, which is, how does that work? I mean, what did you see? What did you hear? How do you know that it's a God?
All right. I don't know it's a God. I'm trusting that it's a God.
Oh, wait a minute.
I choose to believe
that's
that
completely
now we don't have to finish the story.
See
so how we didn't have to go down the story?
Himself. You're interpreting something as that being a manifestation of God. So you've admitted to yourself, you've admitted to us that he didn't reveal himself. You're just interpreting something the way you want to interpret it.
I feel like I can. I don't see any.
Does that seem? Does that? So, Kenny, if I told you.
Not Kenny, Kevin.
Kevin, sorry. Sometimes it's hard to tell. Actually, I don't have my glasses on, so all I could see was the K. I apologize, Kevin. I didn't mean to get your name wrong. If I told you,
no problem.
If I told you that it was revealed to me by the universe in a bowl of cereal that God doesn't exist, and then you said, how does that work? And I gave your answer that, I don't know it was a universe, but would you pay any attention to that?
I'm not saying I don't. I don't know. I can't tell you. I can prove that was God. Okay.
Well, then he didn't reveal himself.
To this day, there's no way I can prove to you that was God.
So how is this a logical?
If I describe the circumstances to you, then maybe you could possibly understand why I thought that might be.
All right, I'll let you describe the circumstances quickly on a couple conditions. One,
I'll try to make it fast.
I didn't even say make it fast. Here's a couple conditions.
Okay.
When you're done, I'm not going to try to debunk it because that is shifting the burden of proof. I may offer potential thoughts on this, but I want to know somebody who does not believe in God because there's not a logical reason to do so. When you're done with your story, if you fail to demonstrate that this is a logical reason, are you going to acknowledge that?
That there's no God?
No, not that there's no God. My position is not that there's no God, but
that's not a logical reason.
Please don't make him tell the cereal story.
Sure there's
I don't want to hear it.
There
I really don't.
possibly be.
Kevin, it's like you don't even listen to what I say. Here's the thing.
No. I will. I'll know.
When I say here's the thing, that means I'm getting ready to fucking say something. So shut up.
Uh-huh.
I'm going to try this again.
All right, go ahead.
You said that you didn't believe in God because there wasn't a logical reason. If the reason that you give is also not logical, are you willing to acknowledge that it's not logical and that therefore you don't have a good reason to believe in God? I'm not asking you to conclude that God doesn't exist.
Yes.
Okay. What's the story?
Okay. So I have a family member, young teenage girl, who at the age of 15 ran away from home. Ended up coming back. She's my niece. She has a mother, all that, right? Well, mother, she's been such a problem.
Everybody has a mother. Let's stay on focus.
Right. Well, the mother wouldn't accept her back in the household.
Okay.
A pregnant girl. She got pregnant while she ran away, by the way. Pregnant girl needs someplace to stay. Brought her here, right? So this girl has problems. And she's always had problems. So baby's born. And she goes out with her mom to do whatever. I don't remember exactly what, but she comes back and they're fighting like crazy. The baby's there, and it hits me. I was like, you know what? I'm not gonna tell you her name, but you really should not fight. You shouldn't display any type of anger in front of your child because it's just bad. I can't explain why it's bad, but I'm sure everybody will agree that it's bad.
So there's another thing you believe without a logical reason, but can we get to the cereal?
Yeah, we'll get to the cereal.
And what kind of cereal it was?
Well, it was rice. I already told you. Now, when after she came home and I said that to her, out of nowhere, and I swear to you, I've never even heard of this concept, but somebody told me. It didn't tell me. I told her. Where it came from, I don't know. But I said, I need to show you the rice experiment. Okay, I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with it and have already debunked it. I don't care. Okay? But something told me to go show her that video, right? And so I showed her the video. Now, basically what the video is, and it's an experiment done on rice, obviously.
Obviously,
right?
Yeah.
Cooked rice, you get cooked rice, and then you divide it into three parts. One is labeled love, another is labeled neutral, and another is labeled hate. You keep them in the same location, and every day somebody walks by it, they express words of love, and it sounds completely crazy. And if you would have told me this a couple of years ago, I'd be like, you're not. But it was something led me to look at this video. And I can explain it. I mean, maybe I'd seen it in a drunken state or high as hell. and subconsciously it was reminded to me, whatever, right? But it was reminded to me. Yeah. Sorry, I'm reading the comments. I should put them off.
Yeah, you really should. Just stay on your story.
Right. So as soon as that, now what happens is if you look at this experiment, you can see that love, the rise that love after just for about 9 weeks or so seems to be the standard when people do this experiment online. So it wasn't just one; it's consistent all the way through. Multiple, maybe 100 different people have done this experiment. Not in a lab; it's done in somebody's house. I wish it was done in a lab. I'd like to see it done in a lab, but yet it hasn't. Maybe you guys can work on that.
Actually, I can save you a lot of time because turns out if you Google Rice experiment debunked, you will find the people who've tested this to show that it's crap.
Right, and I've seen them. I've seen those videos, the debunking videos. I mean, obviously, I'm going to try to see how, if it's true, if somebody has been able to debunk this. And I've watched the video.
Hang on, Kevin.
They haven't debunked, in my opinion.
Kevin.
Okay?
Kevin.
Yeah.
So you did the Rice experiment, and you got a result.
I know. I did not do it myself. I wish I could. I wish I had an environment where I could. But it's going to require a pretty stable environment.
So wait a minute. No. Stop. Because I'm about to lose my shit.
Yeah.
God revealed himself through cereal, and then we find out it's rice.
Yeah, but you haven't let me finish my...
You're right. I haven't. So you're saying I thought you said that you made those piles of rice.
No.
So you saw a video. No, stop. You saw a video of a rice experiment. Did not do the experiment yourself.
Whoa. No. If I just saw the video of a rice experiment, I would say, wow, that's cool. Right? And that's pretty much right. I wouldn't have linked it to God at all. Right? But the fact that I was led to see this, to look at this rice experiment.
I am losing IQ points right now.
What led me to believe in God. It sounds completely ridiculous.
Stop.
I know.
That's it. That's it. You just said it sounds completely ridiculous. So there's a rice experiment, and don't interrupt me. I swear I'll hang up. There's a rice experiment that you saw. You feel like you were led to see this. I don't know what justification you have for thinking you were led to see it. You didn't do the experiment yourself. And so just your feeling that you were led to see this experiment, which you admit sounds ridiculous, is God revealing himself to you?
It very well could be. I don't know for sure.
Oh, fuck off. It very well could be.
I told you, don't make him tell the cereal story, but you had to go ahead.
Lloyd, you were in charge for the last two calls.
Decoration. I mean,
I value your time too much. I screwed up. You are now. I will enjoy my sucker for the last two calls. We're a little bit over time. I know food's going to be showing up soon, so we'll let you go through this because an anonymous caller from Texas
will
prove that there is a God. It's all you. Hang up whenever you want.
Okay. How do I do that?
The red drop button.
That one there. Okay.
Okay.
Anonymous, you're here.
Okay. Yes, I'm here. Can you guys hear me pretty good?
I can hear you, yeah.
Oh, boy. It was painful listening to all that.
I know that was pretty bad, but hopefully you're here to save the day with a logical reason as to why God definitely exists.
Yes, of course. Okay, I want to just ask both of you guys one simple question.
Whoa.
Okay.
Just because we've eaten up a whole bunch of time already, so it shouldn't be about you asking us a question. You have proof that God exists.
Yes.
So what is it?
The Ten Commandments.
I mean, seriously.
No. That's exactly when I would have hung up, too. I mean, exactly. On the nose. All right, last caller for the show. Rob in Quebec, Quebec, you're on with Matt and Lloyd.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Can I say something?
Guy there, yeah, go ahead.
Do you play crokinole, Rob?
Crokinole?
Yeah.
I don't even know what that is.
Oh, are you sure you're from Quebec?
Yeah, I'm from Quebec, but I never heard of crokinole. What is it?
It's this wonderful finger-flicking board game that's a cross between curling and shuffleboard, and it's like my new favorite thing, and I bought a board for us to play up here. But it's made in Canada, and it's like this Canadian thing. Anyway, I was just having fun.
Oh, that's interesting. No, that's interesting. There's a game that I used to play when I was younger. It was called Mississippi. It's a long rectangular table with wooden pucks. Would that be what we're talking about?
That's closer to shuffleboard. This is a round disc, and so in the center there's a hole just big enough for the puck to go in, and that's worth 20, and then there's a ring around that with some pegs that are 15, and then it's 10 and 5. Oh. But it doesn't matter. Regale us with something to take our mind off the last few callers.
Yeah, we need to regain our sanity at this point, and you are our savior.
No, I just want to bring up Noah's Ark because I looked into it, and there's so much compelling evidence. And when you see the Turkish government having signs pointing to the site, and then when you have the measurements aligning with what the biblical measurements are, and then you have these marine engineers basically stating that it's a man-made structure because they're finding steel cables running perpendicular along the bottom of the hull.
Steel.
That's quite a bit of evidence.
Whoa, did you say steel cables?
Rob,
do you know how steel is made?
Yeah,
I do.
Yeah, you do realize that even if Noah existed, and even if Noah built a boat, Noah didn't have access to steel. Right.
Well, we think that, but there was metallurgy back then. Now I don't know what their methods were, but to say that it didn't exist, we really don't know. But they did find lots of cables going perpendicular to each other all along that structure. So that's
okay.
That's
so let me just give you the biggest possible benefit of the doubt. The Turkish government is not letting people go up and investigate. What a lot.
They already did. They had people investigating it, and that's why they endorsed it. That's why they have signs pointing to the site.
Rob,
they found some sticks.
Do you believe so? Well, first of all, I think there's been some confusion because when we were screening your call, we identified you as an atheist. Is that correct?
Well, atheist. I grew up basically not paying attention to anything to do with the Bible or any type of religion as such.
You're an atheist who believes in the story of Noah's flood?
Well, there's a lot of... Yes, I do. Now that I look into it, yes, there's lots of evidence for that.
And do you believe that
we don't have time to go into that today because that'll take a long time to discuss that.
Do you believe that Noah's flood was global?
Yes, absolutely.
Are you aware of the fact that there aren't enough water molecules on the planet to inundate the Earth's crust?
No, that's not true because under the crust, there's actually 5 times
so
more
the water's
water
hidden
all the
under the
surface water
crust
combined.
Isn't that where it would be anyway, according to gravity? Under the crust.
Actually, what happened is that the water came from under the crust and shot upward. It didn't come from the sky; it came from under.
And then God hid it so that we wouldn't find it, so that we'd find the story outrageous.
No. God didn't hide it. The fact you're asking a question about where the water came from.
Well, he hid it. He hid it from the Egyptians, whose civilization existed before and after the flood, and are completely unaware that the entire earth flooded.
We have an item of clothing that is older than the flood is supposed to have been. There are trees that are older than the flood supposedly happened. Do you know what happens to trees when you submerge them? For any length of time.
The trees and all the plant life in the trees actually turned into coal.
But so why are the trees that outdate the date that the flood is supposed to have happened?
And how did freshwater fish and saltwater fish survive?
How do you know that the trees outdate the flood?
Because we can date them using scientific methods.
What method? Would that be carbon dating?
Well, that's one way because carbon dating is good till how many years, Rob? How many years can you go back with carbon dating?
Are you aware that trees have rings?
Carbon dating actually has been debunked many times.
Oh my God!
There's like a late onslaught of nutters.
Yeah.
Am I misinterpreting this?
So, unbeknownst to you, I actually went out on Twitter and said, "Hey, Lloyd's coming," and I don't want him to have a terrible experience. So let's get some like batshit crazy calls in the end, and so they all called their friends.
I mean, the Noah's story. I don't know how anyone can excuse it. There's just it unravels on so many different levels. You're really telling me that every land-dwelling species, and there are literally millions, was squeezed into a box or into a...
And when it was over, the marsupials made it to Australia.
Yeah.
Everything divided up, and then told a compelling lie about it. And saltwater fish and freshwater fish somehow managed to survive in brackish water. Both of them make it through entire civilization. Oh, well, you have to say carbon dating has been debunked. So first of all, go do a study on radiometric dating, because not just carbon dating. There are a number of different radiometric dating methods, and they overlap. And they overlap with other methods like tree dendrology and stuff like that. And so we can put together a good understanding of the timeline, both geological time. We can even get to astronomical time by observing things within our solar system and within our galaxy. When you say, and I realize you're no longer on, I didn't care. I wasn't waiting for an answer from you personally. When you say carbon dating has been debunked, that's just wrong.
No.
What's been debunked is when carbon dating is used in certain ways. And you know how we showed when those results were flawed? By using other radiometric dating methods and other dating methods that can show a reliability. This is what happens when you have a statistical outlier and you have somebody who doesn't know fuck all about science. They throw out all the science. And what science does is it throws out the statistical outlier, because that's what you're supposed to do. One interesting thing, if you have one of those, hey, here's a jar up here with gumballs in it. If you had one of those contests where you ask people to guess how many gumballs are in that thing, if you just had one person do it, who knows how close you're going to get. But if you had 1,000 people guess and averaged it, you will almost get it dead on the nose. Because the wisdom of crowds, which is this nebulous thing, it's not like we all know the answer or all of us kind of know the answer or whatever else, but on the whole, on the average, we are more likely to be right about some things, not everything, than we are to be wrong. That's not an appeal to popularity. That's just the way statistics work. Some people are going to look at that and be able to assess exactly how many of them are in there or pretty close. And some people are going to, there's 1 million gumballs in there. And somebody's going to say 4. It is the science and mathematics that allow us to not only understand exactly how to calculate that, but how some people are better at estimating it than others, and how when you use a statistically large sample, you're going to get closer and closer to accuracy, and why we should toss out the outliers. So if somebody walks in and said there's 4 in there, we toss that one out. If somebody walks in and says there's 1 million in there, we toss that one out. That's still just no guarantee we can get that right. That's not even really science in the same way that radiometric dating is. And so it's not the science that got tossed out. It's a result that was shown to be flawed. As I said earlier, when we found mistakes in science, it was always more and better science that did it. It is the single most consistently reliable method. It is not a pronouncement of truth. Science doesn't make declarations of truth. It just says this is the best model based on the evidence that we currently have. And then we can revise it. That's why I rely on science. Doesn't mean I put my faith in science. It doesn't mean I believe everything that somebody says is science. One of the worst things about the internet and the access that everybody has to all this information is science reporting. If you're a journalist and you're reporting on science, just fucking stop. I would rather see boring headlines from actual scientists that don't misrepresent the facts than whatever clickbait, ooh, we found the God molecule, the God particle, the God this, the Eve that. It's ridiculous. And I know it's because you're trying to sell papers. You're trying to sell magazines. But you're not doing science any benefit. And as we can see from callers today and callers over the last 15 years, you are doing a gross disservice to the community at large. Because people, some of them will recognize, as one of our callers did, maybe they don't understand this science well enough. And yet somehow they still feel compelled and qualified to reach conclusions even while acknowledging they don't understand. And that's the fault of science journalists. That's the fault of science educators. That's the fault of anybody who's putting forth this has been debunked when we're talking about an outlier. Oh, this has shown that there's a God when it hasn't. Set the clickbait aside. Let the scientists write their own damn titles. And even if nobody understands them and it's boring, even if they can't even get it from the synopsis of the paper, that would still be better than leading people to think and running around using the word quantum all the time. Ooh, it's quantum this, it's quantum this. It's obnoxious that we live in a world where we have more access to information than ever, where we have more access to better information than ever, and there are flat earthers. There are people who think that a global flood is possible. There are people who buy into every stupid fucking notion under the sun because, perhaps, there's too much information and no way to tell what's a reliable source and what isn't. And no, I'm not suggesting we put a government in charge and this is rubber stamped or anything else. But at least stop with the Reader's Digest clickbait highlighted summaries that are leading people to think that they have an understanding of something when they clearly don't. We are 50 subscribers away from hitting 300,000 during this show, but I'm going to end it anyway.
So, viewers, on this week's show, we've learned that Noah's Ark is existing in Turkey and has steel cables.
Yes.
That the International Space Station isn't in orbit. And we've learned that God occasionally manifests himself in cereal.
See you next time. There's the guys that make this show happen. Y'all have a great week.
What are we doing, man? What are we doing?
No, you're done.